everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, which I'm range 9 or anything in between. We're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And welcome to the Battle of the Wildcats, Arizona versus K-State in Bill Snyder Family Stadium this Friday, and welcome to the scouting report for that game. And Arizona is a more complicated team in some ways than most people are giving credit for, and in other ways they are far less complicated than people are giving them credit for. But before we dive more in depth about the team itself, we do want to thank the sponsors of today's episode, and that is Greg, Arthur, and Grandma.
Thank you,
Grandma. And if you want to support the show financially and have your name read out at the beginning of every single episode, please be sure to check out the supporters link in our podcast and Twitter bios. But let's just dive straight into the Arizona Wildcats, who are coming into this game ranked at number 20 in the country after a 2-0 start, after being in trouble, honestly, in their first two games at various points within them. Although they ended up pulling away from New Mexico 61-39 and had a really weird performance up against Northern Arizona, 22-10. I'll start off with the Northern Arizona game. I feel like that's the one game because I feel like every team has one game per year where you kind of just shrug your shoulders and say it wasn't a great day at the office. And I think that's probably what Northern Arizona was for this Arizona squad. And, naturally they won it because it was an FCS school, but I don't think that was indicative of what this team is. I genuinely think that the New Mexico and the Oklahoma Bowl game are the better two choices. But honestly, most, I would say, is the more indicative of what this team is.
Yeah, it was a weird game. You're right. Going into halftime, Arizona was down 10-6, which I think makes this game all the stranger because they're coming off a game where the offense just could not be stopped against New Mexico, and Fafita throws for 400. Tet McMillan gets 300 of those yards through the air. And they have several very long explosive touchdown plays, and then they just completely lay an egg in the first game here, in the first half of this game. It was a weird game. Arizona got a safety in this game as well. I'm pretty sure there was a blocked punt in this game too. Really odd. Granted, it's an in-state rival, so those games can end up being a little out of character for some teams. But still, this is I think you probably put it well. Once a year, every team's just going to have a game where they just don't look like themselves, unless you're like Georgia or something. And even then, they still sometimes play with their food a little bit with some of the lower level SEC teams. But weird game, particularly odd that Tet McMillan took a massive step back in production. I don't know if there's ever been a week over week drop in receiving yards larger than Tet McMillan had from week 1 to week 2, going from 300 down to just 11.
Yeah, I think you'd have to start digging into, they were injured in order to get there. But yeah, this is an interesting Arizona team. So I'll let you sort of dive into the notes here about their offensive scheming.
Yeah. They aren't as much the super wide splits team from last year. Forced a lot of one-on-one matchups, which is something that kind of Josh Heupel in Tennessee, I think you could fairly say popularized over these last few years, or at the very least, some of those teams with Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt, they are definitely getting some of the highlights off of just the absurdly wide splits. But Arizona has really good receiver talent and quarterback talent as well, so they can make it work. But despite that, they're still not doing as much of it as they did last year, but they're still leaning towards being a spread team that will occasionally go under center.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty comparable to like the Colin Klein offense, except for instead of pistol, it's mostly just gun and replace the gun with the occasional, under center snap. But I think just I think the under center stuff is mostly just, a change up more than anything else because a lot of their sort of base packaging and their offense runs predominantly out of shotgun. And a part of that could be who their quarterback is, but that's a conversation for, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes from now.
Yeah. Moving on though, most of their running game is built on counter and power from shotgun. But then when they do throw those change ups going under center, they're going to go more to a zone look, which it's easy to forget about their run game with Fafita and McMillan being the major headliners of the entire team. But they still do have a run game that you can't completely ignore.
Yeah, and that's especially worth noting because they only throw the ball like 54% of the time. So they're still running, 46% of the time. You can't just come out and dime. This is not a Mike Leach team. Like, they're still coming out and they're going to run the ball and they're still going to keep you honest. And I think a little bit of that is it's mostly they do run some GT counter, but it's mostly GH or G wing counter, just coming across the formation, just basically setting up a guy to fail and then have that second blocker work up to the second level. I think if I had to guess, there probably is a tag for that play to where they have a read attached to it. I just don't think Noah Fafita really has had the opportunity to pull it yet because everyone's kind of familiar with his athleticism, which again, that we will talk more about Noah Fafita and Noah Fafita's time because he deserves it. He deserves to be talked up and talked about a little bit. But yeah, their running game is a weird blend of traditional and modern from the shotgun sense and more traditional from the under center.
Yeah, which maybe we'll start to see more teams go back to running a little bit more under center because, I mean, it really has in the last 15 years pretty much almost completely gone extinct in major college football unless you're a triple option team. But it's still interesting, though. They run some under center. But now we can move on to the passing game. The passing game, they made that up of 4 foundational concepts. And they do a few others as well to sprinkle in there. Like every modern offense, they will be running mesh, so that way they can get a rub route over the middle, and ideally one of those guys is going to get free unless one of your receivers just doesn't do their job. It's a play that K-State ran a lot under Courtney Messingham, and it was one of the more effective passing concepts that K-State had in that time. And it's just a really common passing concept overall. Other than that, they also have some variations of stick on the quick game. They run like a short hitch with an out right next to it on early downs. That's a personal favorite of mine in College Football 25. I do run that a lot. They'll run a slot smash fade as well from trips. 2 snag routes in the fade from the middle receiver, and then 4 verticals, all reliable. So those concepts make up most of their pass game. But most everything they run outside of those 4 plays are more complementary than staples. But a lot of those concepts, I think, honestly, if you've ever played a Madden game or college football or NCAA game, you're probably familiar with most of those concepts, at least the name, maybe with the exception of slot fade smash.
Yeah, I mean, slot fade is just like a variation of smash. It's basically the better more evolved version of it, because you're still reading the same person. It's just a slightly different route. But yeah, they do have the variation of slot fade from trips where it is those two snag routes. They also have a more traditional version of it where they just, have it in a 2x2 set. One guy's running a little hitch, the other guy's running the fade. And sort of complementary to that stick play that they run a unique version of it, as unique, quote unquote, as if there's anything new under the sun outside of UNLV. But if they're running it from a trip set, the outside receiver in a stick concept normally runs an alert go. In this offense, more often than not, it's either a bullet slant, which is one step outside and then normal slant route, or a short-ish post to sort of work that over the middle in case the linebackers sort of bite down and start fading towards the stick side. But a lot of what their offense is best at is if they're throwing deep, or if they're throwing over the middle, they're going to probably be doing it intermediate or deep middle. But it's really the outside passing game that is most of what Noah Fifita is best at. And of course, that it's stereotypical, but pretty much every quarterback Noah Fifita's size has to be a really, really good outside passer, because they're not going to be quick game over the middle unless it is drags on mesh. Which, speaking of, Connor, you have the beginning of the notable players on offense.
Yeah, so we can start by talking about Noah Fifita. He's a favorite right now for random QB who rockets up the draft boards in the preseason. And it's hard not to see why, because, rocketing to prominence has kind of been his thing. Because going into last year, he was not the starting quarterback at Arizona. That was Jaden DeLora. And then he got injured and Fifita stepped in, and they actually got even better. And Fifita really, I think, proved himself to be the better quarterback. Not even that DeLora was bad, but Fifita was just genuinely really a fantastic QB from the get-go. But he has a lot of traits that you want in a quarterback. He's a natural leader with really good arm strength, and he does not often put the ball in harm's way. He does have 2 interceptions early this year, but regardless, he's
one of those was tipped.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate that it has to go that way. There should whole separate side tangent. There should probably be additional stats for a interception that's tipped, although it gets a little subjective at that point. But last year he threw 25 touchdowns to 6 picks. So only 9 turnover-worthy plays the entire season. So really, really quality stuff for Fifita, particularly with how much they were leaning on him at times, him and Ted McMillan, that is. But he does take risks, though, but the ones he does are calculated. He'll throw a 50-50 ball to Ted McMillan, who's one of the top receivers in the country. I think right now he is the best receiver in the country, and at this exact point in time, I don't think it's close, honestly. Like, he's really, really, really good. But back to Fifita, his best trait, though, is his ability to work in and out of the pocket. He's got excellent pocket awareness and a great sense of where pressure is coming from and how to avoid it. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he is quick. And he's able to, at the very least, extend plays a little bit. However, like many shorter QBs, and like Ace mentioned earlier, he does have a big weakness with having with struggling to work the true middle of the field. Great outside passer, so it doesn't hurt his game that much, but still that's an area where he's not normally going as much. But all in all, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks that K-State sees the entire season, because Fifita is just really, really, really quite good. But he definitely when he does throw between the numbers, it's almost certainly going to be within 10 yards. He's only gone beyond 10 yards over the middle 8 times this season, and that's on a pretty significant amount of attempts. But regardless, he still fantastic quarterback and one of the best in the conference.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that people will think, and this will sort of serve as a transition towards the next player that we're going to talk about. So maybe I'll save it for the end of this statement. But Noah Fifita is he's wise really beyond his years, because he's only, I think, a redshirt sophomore. He's not an old guy at all. He stepped in near immediately and became the guy for Arizona. He elevated the offense, which was already doing pretty well under Jaden DeLora. And like I said, the only really big weakness is his relatively slight frame and the fact that he's not the best at working the middle of the field. But that's also kind of not that big a deal, because the entire offense isn't really predicated off of play action. And that's where play action is best. I mean, they only run play action about, I think it's 13% of the time, somewhere in there. And there's a reason for that. It's because Noah Fifita doesn't really need the extra help that you get from play action, because that's more for middle passers or people who pass over the middle and people whose pocket awareness isn't the greatest. So they want to split the field in half and get the defense on their back foot. I mean, that's pretty much the entire reason why Brock Purdy is such a great quarterback in the NFL, not at Iowa State. He was just kind of okay there, which is still really funny. But I mean, Brock Purdy has made a career in the NFL off of the Shanahan running game because he's able to constantly hit his spot on play action. Noah Fifita doesn't need that. He just has that it factor that you really want in a quarterback as an outside passer. And that talent more than transcends the fact that he probably has the best receiver in the country on his side, which, yeah, have fun, man.
And for what it's worth, yeah, you were just about right. His play action percentage, only 16.4% of the time. Fifita's running play action, which is very, very, very low. 83.6% of the time, no play action. He's also way better without play action too. So that goes beyond just the eye test there. That's stats prove it too. But yeah, we can get now into the best player on this roster and one of the best receivers that K-State's faced in a long time. That's Tet McMillan. Probably the best receiver that K-State has faced since CeeDee Lamb back in that Oklahoma game that K-State won in 2019. He doesn't really have anything that presents as a weakness. It's tough to think of sufficient superlatives for Tet McMillan. He has great speed, great concentration, and he has great hands as well, with an ability to get open. That's very impressive, particularly for his size, because he's 6'5", 212, while having all of these fantastic attributes. I mean, he's a true alpha complete receiver. And he has really great chemistry with Noah Fifita as well. And that makes it even more difficult to find holes in this game. Really, the only flaw you could say is that he's been a little injury prone, but that's not something that you can rely on. That's just kind of a dice roll, really. The only way that people have been able to stop him has been bracketing. Northern Arizona, of all schools, was the school to figure out. They just put him in a bracket, and they doubled him everywhere he went. And it worked. He only had 2 catches for 11 yards against Northern Arizona, and it really kind of stalled out the Arizona offense. I don't think they were expecting that, but they may be expecting it now. But McMillan is just just an unbelievable talent as number one receiver. Like right now, he has more yards on his own than the rest of Arizona's entire team combined. And that's not just receivers, that's everybody, including running backs and tight ends. Last year, he had 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's averaging 26 yards per catch this season. Most of that coming from a 300-yard explosion against New Mexico. I think I've about covered everything I reasonably could with Ted McMillan, but the overarching point is that this is going to be not only one of the best players we face all year, but one of the best players that we faced in the entire Kleiman era.
Yeah, he's one of those extremely rare receivers that could go in the top like 8, and very few people would ever call a reach outside of his injury history. I mean, he has over 230 targets. He's dropped the ball 5 times. 5. He does everything. He plays bully ball. He's able to break off of releases with both finesse and strength. He does everything, and he does it at an extremely high level. I don't think that in the Kleiman era they have faced. He's basically in a class of 1 and maybe 2, because I do think he's better than CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb just has an argument to be in the same tier as Ted McMillan. But I wasn't crying every time that I thought about the idea of CeeDee Lamb in one-on-one coverage. If we play Ted McMillan in one-on-one press coverage, we're asking for trouble. Don't do that.
Yeah. I think if we did that, but what you just said, I would pencil in a loss for this game, because McMillan might break the all-time receiving record against us if we just went one-on-one press on an island against McMillan. No offense at all to Garber or Parrish, but no, they're not gonna do that against McMillan. That's just not gonna work.
Yeah, no, it's not a winning. In fact, I would say that is the definition of a losing formula. But now we get the last of the notable offensive players, he's played both right and left tackle. If I had to guess, he's probably going to play right tackle, and he's Polynesian, so I'm going to let you have the first crack at his name, because we know damn well that I would not be able to do it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you letting me do that, but I'm rolling with I believe it's Jonas Avainea. If I had to guess, I might be missing an E sound, because I know that sometimes there's some extra syllables that you put into Polynesian names, but I'm pretty sure it's Avainea. But point is, Jonas Avainea, really, really good player. 3-year starter now. He's 6'5", 336, and he's another projected first-round pick along with Ted McMillan. He's really, at his core, he's a mauler at right tackle. His best ability outside of his sheer weight, though, is his ability to be an anchor in the pass game. He is like some of that comes from him having great size, although his size can in some ways be a disadvantage at times, because he can't handle true speed as well as some other tackles can. He's not a technician necessarily, but he's just so physically gifted that then really makes up for a lot of those shortfalls. That, and also his motor. He has a really intense willingness to stop any rushes before they have a chance to get going. So, I mean, that's half the battle when you're a tackle out on an island, is high effort and being more athletic than the guy across from you, or at the very least having some great physical gifts. And Jonas Avainea does have that, even though, again, he's not the quickest guy in the world. But if he gets his hands on you, like, you you're probably not going to be pushing him very far. I think he's incredibly strong.
Yeah, and I think sort of alongside his ability to anchor in the pass rush is he's just jump setting people. Like he will jump in front of you as opposed to waiting for you to come to him in the pass rushing set. So his goal is to eliminate your power and speed before it even gets going. So that's sort of how he deals most of the time with speed rushing. But again, if he is in a true drop back pass set where he's not trying to jump set someone or it's like a wider alignment, I think he probably could have a few issues. But again, most of pass rushing is based off of power. So if you eliminate someone's ability to use power, you're just letting the quarterback step up because the only other option is to go around. And that's one thing Noah Fafita is really, really good at is stepping up. I mean, I wasn't overly impressed with a lot of the offensive line of Arizona, which is despite the fact that they've been good. Like they've been a perfectly good offensive line in terms of how they grade out. But I think the main reason why this offensive line is so good is because Noah Fafita is sort of the perfect complement to them, where he has the ability to get out of the pocket and get himself out of sticky situations if one person fails. This isn't a line where everyone is going to fail all at once. That's sort of what this line is. So even though they only have one spectacular piece, and don't misunderstand, Jonah, I'm not even going to try, is a spectacular piece at tackle. But, it is more, the line itself is just okay outside of tackle, but Noah Fafita just sort of elevates them to that next level.
One more thing I want to know about Jonas Vainea is that this year PFF lists him as having played not one, not two, but three positions. That's with 69 snaps at left tackle, 39 at right tackle, and then they're listing him as playing 10 at inline tight end. So they've been finding new and creative ways to use him this year, and he's been doing a little bit of rotation. He's also gotten some time in the past at right guard. In fact, that's where he began his career in 2022. He played all of his snaps at right guard, but he's now played 3 of the 5 line positions and played a little bit of inline tight end.
Yep. So now we can move on into the defensive side of the ball. And I'll just say it, the defense has not looked great in the first couple of games, including giving up 39 to a New Mexico team with a brand new head coach. But I'll leave the initial notes to you. And honestly, you could probably roll through the first two there.
Yeah. So man coverage is their game. They're going for manipulate, man-splain, man coverage is their whole playbook, really. They play a ton of man coverage, and they don't have a lot of corners that have a glaring weakness in that area. And then formation-wise, they mostly are running variations of the 4-2, 2 variations in particular. One of them is the hybrid look that most of college football runs, and the other is a 2-4 that we've seen from UCF, and we saw a little bit of that from UT Martin.
Yeah, and the biggest strength of that sort of 4-2 is you always kind of know what gaps and what bubbles are going to develop in your defense. And, having that 4 down, it just sort of gives you that same level of consistency, which I think is a big reason why they want to play that man coverage is, they play all types of man coverage. And it's not like they don't play zone at all. It's just they really, really like playing man coverage because they have the guys to do it. And it sort of is that their defense is very much a defense where they know what to expect on a down-to-down basis. They're going to keep things pretty simple, and that is their entire game plan. Their game plan on defense is being more talented and better than the offense they're going up against.
which sometimes works as long as
Yeah,
you're actually better than them, but
yeah.
it can backfire at times. But yeah, their defensive line, as we get into more position groups, they are largely unimpressive. They don't get particularly consistent pressure, and they aren't super forceful in the running game either. They're mostly space eaters, and they'll sometimes get a free run off of a stunt, like an end over stunt is what they've done for the most part. But they've recorded a grand total of 3 sacks and 9 QB hits on the year, and that's been uh, games against New Mexico and Northern Arizona, which are two teams that they should very easily outmatch. But they haven't really managed to do that, unfortunately. And that's also in 141 defensive snaps as well. So definitely could be better there. They're getting an okay amount of hurries, but not really getting a lot out of it. But moving on, they do have some notable players on defense that we could get into, but I'll let you talk a little bit about this defensive line unit, though.
If the K-State offensive line gives up more than like 2 sacks, I think that is a cause for concern, because I don't think Arizona's hiding a whole lot, mostly because I do think that their defense is what it is. Like they want to sort of keep that simple game plan and just execute it really, really well. The problem is their defensive line is bad. They may genuinely have a worse defensive line than Tulane had, because even Tulane had Patrick Jenkins. There's no dudes on the Arizona defensive line. And of course, now that I say that, because God punishes hubris, they will be getting 7 sacks. But I there's just, I don't see it with their defensive line. And they're not even particularly like strong or beefy in the run game either. They're just kind of there. Like they're fine against the run, but they're not good enough against the pass to sort of justify them just being okay in run defense. So if there's a sort of soft spot on this Arizona squad, it's almost certainly the defensive line.
Yeah, which based on how K-State's run its offense so far, that could be a pretty easy point to exploit for the Wildcats. But now we can move in to a handful of notable players on defense, which they still do have. It's just that they're all defensive backs. And the first one we'll begin with is Takario Davis. He's a corner, and he's yet another projected first-round pick for Arizona. He is the last one that we will be talking about. But this Arizona team definitely does have some legit talent. It's just spread out across the skill positions on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. But Takario Davis, he's the prototype for a lengthy press corner. He is mainly seeking to bully the receiver, not only at the line of scrimmage, but throughout the entire rep. And so being aggressive, that can make him really annoying to deal with and a bit of a nightmare for receivers. But at the same time, whenever you play that aggressive style, you also do run a higher risk of getting a penalty, which he has been prone to seeing be thrown his way.
Yeah, I think for a K-State comp, again, every time I give comps, it's not because they are this player, it's because it's a useful illustration, is Julius Brents from K-State with shorter arms, because no one has the arms that Julius Brents has outside of Jeff Okuda. So they have that very same alpha corner mentality where their number one aim every single time is to lock you up and just jam you no matter where you're going. And so I really do think that this is sort of the biggest matchup problem for K-State on offense, is whoever's lined up against Takario Davis, because the only receiver that has like a prototypical advantage against Takario Davis is Trey Spivey. And I don't want to do that to Trey Spivey yet. But yeah, Takario Davis has, I think he's quietly one of the better players in the Big 12 that just doesn't get mentioned by virtue of him playing defensive back and not getting like a ton of picks, because like he's sort of, no one throws it his way because he's bumping everyone off their route. So he's eliminating a progression every time that he gets hands on someone. Does that mean he's unbeatable? No, he's a corner. Every corner can be beaten. But it's just on a rep-to-rep basis. What he wants to do is knock everything off of its timing. And he's very, very good at it.
Yeah. And even when he does get targeted, he does not give up a lot of catches. Last year, was targeted 54 times, but he only gave up 23 receptions. So that's a reception rate of 42.6% when targeted. And he paired that with 12 pass breakups. Off to a little bit slower of a start this year. He's already got 2 penalties through 2 games, that is. He's been targeted 8 times, given up 5 catches, and he's also missed a couple of tackles so far. Again, this is all PFF, so it's approximations, but still, he's probably frustrated at this point and looking to get a season on the right track. And our receiving room is definitely vulnerable to a guy like Takario Davis. So it'll be interesting to see what we do when we have to go up against him.
Yep.
That takes us to the next notable player on defense, which is Marquise Groves Killebrew. As another corner, has a fantastic name.
That's a great corner name.
Groves Killebrew is a excellent pass breakup name. If he was on our team, I would love to hear Mitch Fortner about his name after a pick. But unfortunately, he's on the other Wildcats. So while he's not collecting much in the way of draft hype, he's arguably been the better corner between him and Takario Davis. He has a very similar bulldog mentality, but the big trade-off, it is a big trade-off because he's just smaller than Takario Davis. Takario Davis is 6'4", 190 pounds. And when you're a corner, if you're playable and 6'3" or taller, that automatically pretty much makes you a minimum day 2 pick, it feels like, because those corners are at a premium. But Marquise Groves Killebrew, I'm just realizing his initials are MGK.
Yeah.
He's got way more twitch, though. He's sticky a different way than Takario Davis. And he's quick enough, though, to make up space very quickly. And is still a really great cornerback in his own right. Just a very different cornerback from Takario Davis, which is kind of useful, I think, maybe as a defense to have that versatility and be able to throw 2 different types of corners at guys, kind of, once again, to complicate state, like Julius Brents and Echo Boydo. 2 very different corners that both did things very effectively, just in different ways.
Yeah, that was actually going to be pretty much my comp for Marquise Groves Killebrew, was going to be that sort of complementary second corner that you'd prefer to have on, that Z receiver who may be moving in motion a little bit more. But MGK is listed as, I think, 6 foot on ESPN. I think some sites have him listed at 5'10", 5'11". I'm much more apt to believe that. But he really does have that sort of twitch on the outside, but he still has the ability to jam at the line of scrimmage. He's just not as good at it because, again, he's just not out-lengthening everyone with his arms. But, again, this defensive backfield, there's one more name that we're going to have for notable players. And spoilers, it's another defensive back. All 3 of them are corners. They have an amazing cornerback room at Arizona.
Yeah. And one more thing on Marquise Groves Killebrew. Statistically, at the very least, he's having a much better start to the season than Takario Davis. He's been targeted 10 times, but only given up 3 catches. Also has 3 pass breakups already. So off to a good start and 0 missed tackles too. I guess the maybe major disadvantage, if any, is that he's on his 3rd team in 3 seasons. He's been at Texas A&M and Louisville. And so this is his first time at Arizona, but he seems to be adjusting really well. So maybe not much of a disadvantage there at all. But that takes us into our final notable player on defense, and that is Traden Stukes. He's their slot corner, and he rounds out the notable defensive backs. And he's their interception leader this year. And it's easy to see why. He has very elite length for a guy that plays mostly in the slot. And he doesn't have necessarily the same wiggle that a lot of slot defenders have. But he's been able to find ways to compensate for it. And he's also in his 5th year of playing at Arizona. He's been getting snaps since 2020 already. So he's a elder statesman in the room, and he's already got a pick this year, a touchdown this year, 2 pass breakups already. Has given up receptions 71% of the time he's been targeted, but he has been a bit of a playmaker though. So you have some give and take, I suppose, is maybe the best way to put it so far with Traden Stukes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Traden Stukes, like the reception percentage, is by virtue of him playing that slot position, where just because you're not going to be able to press the slot receiver with a whole lot of consistency. So you're not going to be able to disrupt the timing in the same way. So you're going to give up more catches to the slot receiver. That's just kind of how it works. But Stukes has been a consistent piece of this defense, like you said, since 2020. And I really do find it very, very impressive how he is able to be a functional slot player, like a true slot corner, not a safety, because safeties like do more in the way of, like traditional run defense coming downhill. No, Traden Stukes is just like a nickel corner. He is a true corner, but he's able to do that at 6'2" and nearly 200 pounds. So it's just really impressive how he has that skill set. And like I keep saying, it all goes back to the fact that Arizona wants to keep their game plan relatively simple so they can constantly play fast. So they're going to, all 3 of the defensive backs are going to come up to the line of scrimmage, going to look at a guy, point at him, say, that's my guy, and just let the cards fall where they may, basically. And, like they do play variations of man coverage. So they do play 2-man or cover 5 if you're one of those people. But they also play, more cover 1 when they blitz. I don't think I've seen them run 0 a lot this year. That doesn't mean it's not in the playbook, because this is a defense that would run 0. But yeah, I'm really, really impressed with their defensive backfield. If you could spread out the talent on their defensive backfield to the other parts of the defense, this would be a pretty solid defense. The problem is that it just hasn't happened that way. I mean, New Mexico of all teams was able to run all over them. That shouldn't happen. But yeah, all in all, my overall takeaways from the defense are they have a lot in the way of defensive back talent. Their defensive line isn't very good, and their linebackers are average to the point of not really being worth their own like whole segment. Although one of them, who's barely playing, is apparently getting undrafted hype because he was a former 5-star. Happens, I guess. But I think that this is a defense that very well could be exploited, and not just in the same way that you're thinking of, like, oh, they have really good corners, let's just run the ball 30 times a game. No, you could work over the middle too. You just have to be very, very careful with the defensive backs when you're working the outside. You can still work over the middle with the linebackers just fine. But Connor, what are your overall impressions of the defense, so far up to this point, I guess?
Yeah, it's been a tale of two games for Arizona. I mean, yeah, giving up 39 to a New Mexico offense, which granted, I do think the New Mexico offense is sneaky mediocre. They're not 39 points mediocre. they're that's a team that should have been held probably to more around like 20. Although I do think Devin Dampier is actually like a kind of decent quarterback. Like I like him. He's just kind of in a not great situation. But then the following game against Northern Arizona, they only gave up one touchdown defensively, and it was on a trick play as well in the red zone. Like a flea flicker reverse pass that like every team does, and for some reason everyone always falls for it. I'm sure we'll fall for it at least 4 times this year based on how things have been going. But this is a solid defense with some interesting pieces in the defensive backfield, which the passing game's already been not poor, but has been slow to develop this year. And I think we might see that continue this game, particularly with the quality of cornerbacks that they have, unless Trace Spivey decides to have a coming out party and moss people a few times, which I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, to
I
see.
take it.
I wouldn't be shocked to see, particularly Trace Spivey, get more snaps because he's only had 8 snaps this entire season so far. He's got 4 receptions, so he's been quite efficient with his time out wide. But Dante Cephas, he's had a 29 snaps this year so far, and hasn't really been producing. So I wouldn't be shocked if we maybe see a reduction in Dante Cephas snaps and maybe get Trace Spivey in a little bit more. So like there could be an opportunity for the receiver in a breakthrough this week, but I think that the big thing to expect from this game is probably yet another really excellent performance from the running backs, which we're anxiously awaiting the week where we don't have to just rely on DJ Giddens to rush for 120 yards to get us out of danger, but that also might just be the smart play this week. So, if it's the right move, then still make it, even if it's a little bit annoying.
Yeah. So now we can move into the stories to watch going into this game. And I feel like the most important one is spoilers. This is one of 2 games that I think on the schedule this year where it takes one player going off for K-State to lose. And that is a very exclusive list of Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter from Colorado. That's it. That's the exclusive list of the 2 players that if they go off, it's game over. Like there's nothing really to be done about it. Travis Hunter does scare me, though. He's really fun to watch, but that's not a now problem. But so I think the most important question and the biggest thing to watch is what is K-State's plan for Tet McMillan?
I think it has to involve a double team the entire game with no exceptions. I think I can't really imagine a situation where it would be intelligent to leave anybody in a solo coverage situation without any assistance. I mean, there's obviously going to be probably at least a few plays where it may not be like a tight double team, but instead it's just over the top help. But I think that we really just have to heavily focus on shutting down McMillan because, I mean, last week, Northern Arizona did exactly that, and the Arizona offense really struggled to make things happen. Even though they do have some other decent pieces, Fafita's still a good quarterback. They have other decent receivers. They have a good running back, Quayle Conley. But, McMillan is the biggest threat that we'll probably face all year, at least potentially. So it has to be a double team in the bracket. pretty much the entire night, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the winning formula. If you're going to play man coverage, you have to have a high-low bracket on him, or at least help over the top. But I think the biggest takeaway that I had from the Northern Arizona game is if you eliminate Tet McMillan, the other receivers aren't going to consistently beat you. Like they may get, a catch here or there, and they're going to get open on every other play every once in a while, but there's no one on the offense that is going to be that sort of complementary piece. So there's no particularly compelling reason to not bracket Tet McMillan, especially looking back at that Northern Arizona game where that was their entire strategy, where it was, we're going to have two guys covering Tet McMillan. Everyone else is either going to be in one-on-ones or zone coverage. We'll figure it out as we go. And then Arizona only scored 22 points, which isn't like a bad offensive performance if you're playing another Power 5. This was an FCS school that is projected at the bottom of their conference. So I really think the winning formula is do not let Tet McMillan beat you, because outside of Tet McMillan, the receivers room is honestly pretty below average.
Yeah, and they're not really producing, like you said. I mean, their next best receiver outside of Tet McMillan has 12 catches for 315 yards through 2 games. Their next best is Jeremiah Patterson, who has 4 catches for 40 yards and a touchdown, which is considerably less impressive than 12 for 315, according to my calculations. And also, just a fun side note, their number 4 leading receiver this year is kind of old friend alert, and a guy that K-State almost landed in the transfer portal. That's Montana Lamonius Craig, who transferred out of Colorado following their spring game in 2022. And we nearly landed him, but he ended up at Arizona instead. So you really are only going to know that if you follow recruiting and don't have much of a life like me and Ace. But for the few of you that do get it, I hope that scratches an itch for naming random college football players.
Yeah. I think the next biggest thing to watch is this going to be the game where we see a little bit more Dylan Edwards? Because this is the game where I really would like to see more Dylan Edwards against a not good defensive line and a painfully average at best linebacking room. Seeing Dylan Edwards in the slot, that makes me very happy. If we see that more, especially this game, I mean, there is a world where this is a shootout, and there's a world where this is a defensive slogfest. Those two worlds exist and are probably equally likely. But Dylan Edwards getting involved makes it much more likely to take it from that slugfest to giving K-State an opportunity to sort of, operate the way they want and to sort of dictate the pace of the game.
Yeah. Chris Kleiman, he, in his press availability on Monday, said that he, quote, challenged his guys or his offensive play callers to find ways to get Dylan the ball more, which comes off as very passive, but I think it's a very nice way for Coach Kleiman to say that he asked Riley, why is Dylan Edwards not getting the ball more? Are you stupid? And because we talked about it a lot on the review already, which if you haven't listened to the Tulane game review, we do talk a lot about Dylan Edwards not getting the ball much, but the point remains. And I think we'll probably see some changes for that this game because particularly with we've been talking a lot about the cornerbacks and how good they are. So this could be a very unique opportunity for Dylan Edwards in the passing game because if we're getting Dylan Edwards on linebackers, I mean, like that could be a really good situation for us. So there may be some creative ways to get Dylan involved in the pass game. But I'm really, really hoping that we see some more snaps for Dylan Edwards, because he had 10 snaps in the first game and 12 against Tulane. By my calculations, that is a total of 22 snaps. And that also, by my calculations, is not enough. So I'm really hoping that we see some more Dylan Edwards this week. Also hope that he gets back at kick return, because if we're not going to be using him this much on offense, we should at least have him returning the kicks. So I was a little frustrated with that. I didn't mention it on the review, but I was very frustrated that Jace
yes,
continually back there.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
I guess maybe I'll eat crow at some point, but I would rather have Dylan back there, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I feel like we don't even really need to talk that much about defensive back communications issues. That just needs to get figured out.
Yeah. I as worried as I should be, we have kind of gone through this song and dance every season the last few years, and they have in fact figured out defensive back communication every time. Last year after the Mizzou game, we were ready to
burn Marquis Siegel at the stake.
Yeah, that was the metaphor I was trying to think of, but the imagery, I should say. But no, the Clanderman, I think, will get it figured out, despite the deserved skewering that he was given. I still think he's going to figure it out and be just fine. This is a big week to figure it out, so I would really like it to be this week and not have to instead wait for conference play to start for pass coverage to be good. So maybe with Arizona technically being in the conference, we can finally be good at pass coverage this week.
I would like that, actually. So now we can go into offensive and defensive MVP picks. Do you want to pick first for offense or defense?
I'll pick first for offense.
Okay. So you get the first pick. There you go.
I will say Dylan Edwards. I think that the offense is going to get the message. I think Dylan Edwards is not going to play more snaps than DJ Giddens, but I think that he's going to have the most productive snaps, which has been true so far. But I think Dylan Edwards is a huge game against Arizona, and he's utilized as much in the run game as he is in the pass game.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my first pick. So instead, I'm going to make this backwards and pick your guy, Garrett Oakley. And the main reason I pick Oakley is because for a team that plays a lot in the way of man coverage, Garrett Oakley is that sort of mismatch problem as an inline tight end, because I don't trust any of their linebackers to cover him. And their safeties may do it somewhat, but even then, Garrett Oakley would be the linchpin for a safety having to go down more into the box, and that just frees up everyone else to get their opportunity to break press and get those one-on-one opportunities. So to me, Garrett Oakley, if not Dylan Edwards or DJ Giddens, who is the honorable mention here, it has to be Garrett Oakley. But my defensive pick, this one's complicated, because I really think it will take two players for it to be like a true MVP. But I think I'll go with the one that I think would probably have the most impact, and that's Damian Ilalio. And the main reason I say that is because if you ask any quarterback what their least favorite thing is, it is interior pressure. And that's what Damian Ilalio has been pretty good at this year. Plus, he's been a solid piece in the running game against an interior offensive line that I think is just all right. So I think that as that anchor in the middle of the defense, I think Ilalio is a really solid pick to be the defensive MVP.
I'm going to roll here with Desmond Purnell. The reason I am picking Desmond Purnell is because we're going to be spending a lot of time making sure that Ted McMillan doesn't beat us at least as much as he is capable of. And that means that there's going to be a lot of pressure on the linebackers to do some run defense without as much help from the safeties as they may normally get. So I am projecting Desmond Purnell to have a fantastic week tackling because they still have a good run game that needs to be taken care of. And which, granted, I guess you could really pick any of the linebackers who they've all really been fantastic this year. But I'm rolling with Purnell right now since I guess he's my favorite. I don't know.
All right, so moment of truth. K-State, what is your official score projection, and what happens if K-State wins, and what happened if K-State lost?
I actually haven't thought of a score projection at all, but I'm going to come up with one right now. And I'm going to say K-State is going to win 38-35 in this one. It's going to be a close one. I don't think that there's much of a way around that unless Arizona are frauds or we've been hiding everything. But I think Ted McMillan's going to get a few big touchdowns. I do mean a few. And but I do think that K-State is more talented across the board relative to Arizona, who has some incredible star power. But I think that our run game is just going to wear their defense down over the course of the game, and K-State ends up winning. I think K-State wins if we're able to establish the run and we're able to force at least one turnover by Arizona. As long as we aren't turning the ball over like a bunch of times. And how K-State loses this game is very easy. It's if we let Ted McMillan break the single season or the single game receiving yards record. But more specifically, if we let Ted McMillan and Noah Fafita just throw the ball all over the field, then we're not going to stand much of a chance in this one.
Yeah, I think my official score projection is K-State coming out on top, and I think it's going to be a sweaty. I think it'll end up being 28-24 in favor of K-State. And I don't think there will be a single time in this game where I feel remotely comfortable. K-State wins, like you said, if they're able to force a turnover and sort of control the pace of the game. To me, that's going to be the most important. That's always the most important thing when you're going up against a high-powered offense, is to sort of control the pace. And that doesn't mean running the ball 45 times a game. It just means basically not letting explosive plays get in the middle of long, efficient drives for the other side. You don't want to have those really, really long drives, and you don't want to give up those big plays where you're forcing them on second, third, and long, and you're just giving it up. And on the offensive side of the ball, the receivers just need to contribute. I think against a really, really good defensive backfield, I think the receivers are probably a good pick to be the difference maker. I know I picked Oakley as my MVP, but a big contingent of that was Garrett Oakley is going to be the one that's going to force the one-on-one matchups. That means that some of the receivers has to win their one-on-one matchups. So, and unfortunately, K-State would drop this game if they have the same communication issues they had last week. And if they let Arizona sort of take control and play their pace in the way that they want to play, which is, run the ball, deep shot, middle field shot, or intermediate shot, and just keep picking up chunks, they can eat some negative plays with how well they're able to pick up chunk yardage. So to me, it's going to come down to staying communicative on defense and making sure that Arizona can't play the way they want.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Hopefully, the cat script helmet curse will remain intact with Arizona wearing their own version of the cat script. So,
yeah, we actually didn't reveal that we're also wearing alternates.
As long as they're not cat script, then I guess we see the alternates curse in Bill Snyder Family Stadium will fall. It's just a matter of which Wildcat will prevail.
All right. So, Connor, what are your final thoughts going into the Friday primetime matchup on Big Boy Fox?
I'm glad that I will not be listening to Tim Brando.
I really hope that I get the opportunity, a good start to the birthday weekend. Birthday. All right, but that's all. So thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to follow us more personally, I am at AC Edwards 00.
I'm at Connor Baltzor, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, as well as the supporters link found in our podcast and Twitter bio. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.